Welcome to the Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Stuart Mandel, joined by Ralph Russo. No Bruce Feldman for this episode. We've got a lot to hit on in college football. Don't forget, every episode of our show is available on YouTube at Audible Show. It's Thanksgiving week, Ralph. Everybody's filling up on turkey. They're heading hopefully to Trader Joe's to get their last minute items for their Thanksgiving meal. And of course, Ralph, we got Iron Bowl, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas A&M. It's one of the greatest weeks of the year with all these rivalries. But what do you say we start with, before we get to our picks? We had another coach firing on Sunday.
Like clockwork, it just seems like it's a Sunday routine throughout most of this college football season. Is at some point, some coach is going to get fired. Not too surprising, this one, right, Stu? Especially considering the events of Saturday in the Stanford Cal is the big game, right? It's not the game, the big game, which I think is also Harvard Yale.
Yeah, it's the big game, but it's also the battle for the axe, right? Mm-hmm. They play for the axe. If you've ever seen the two kind of nerdy student bases, student groups square off, they stare at each other. When the clock hits zero, they either give it back or whatnot. Look, Ralph, it turned ugly fast for Justin Wilcox at Cal. And he's somebody who before the season I figured was in trouble. It's kind of plateaued there already. And then they lose Fernando Mendoza. They lose Jade Knott. There are former Cal players starting in key positions for playoff contenders all over the country. And then they were kind of a surprise, thanks to their freshman quarterback. Got the 6 wins, frankly, quicker than I think we would have expected. Beat Louisville at Louisville when they were in the top 15 only a couple weeks ago. So after that Louisville win, they had an off week. They come back. It's the Stanford game. At Stanford, as we know, Stanford, not very good. They were 3-7 going to the game. And Stanford whoops them 31-10. There were 2 fumble recoveries for touchdowns in that game. Some of you may have seen the clip that was all over SportsCenter of Andrew Luck being interviewed as one of those plays happened. And so you could feel the whole outlook around that program changed overnight. And on Sunday, Ron Rivera, the former NFL head coach who is their GM and who has hiring and firing power, much like Andrew Luck, fires Justin Wilcox. He was there for 9 seasons, Ralph, which is a lot in this day and age, but especially for a coach who, believe it or not, never finished above 500 in his conference.
I think it speaks to what has gone on with Cal football that Wilcox even lasted that long. And I think he's done an okay job under the circumstances, but I think the circumstances also explain how he could do an okay job and still have the job for 9 years without really doing anything that distinguishes himself, right? They've been running in the red for the athletic department. They haven't had a lot of leadership. They haven't seemed to be very motivated to be good at football again, the way they were when Aaron Rodgers was there and Jeff Tedford not that long ago. It's 20 years, but it's not that long ago. It's not like the grainy, black and white footage days. So, the COVID year was certainly, kind of a mess there for Cal. There's just been a lot of things working against Cal football, but it's also led to the inertia that led to Justin Wilcox just sort of like being there every year, not being good enough to get another job, not being bad enough to be fired. I actually think, Stu, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, even though they were playing better or above expectations, my suspicion was this season was almost always going to end up, unless they went, 9-3 or something like crazy like that this season was always going to lead to a coaching change because of the situation with Ron Rivera, bringing in a GM, giving him power, that inevitably Rivera was going to hit the reset button in Berkeley.
I mean, it always... Once they made that decision, and by the way, it was a whole kind of donor mutiny where at first it was going to be your traditional, he reports to the AD. And they're like, no. If Andrew Luck's going to have hiring power, so should Ron Rivera. So yes, to an extent, but they got off to a 5-2 start. They beat Louisville. I thought, okay, he might be okay, but you can't lose to your rival 31-10. I mean, he got a lot of leeway because few places in America had tighter COVID restrictions than Berkeley, California. And it really, their best season they had was in 2019. They went 8-5. They were feeling some momentum, and then everything gets shut down. They have basically like a lot of these teams out here had like almost like an exhibition season. I remember that they played a game against UCLA where the whole defensive line was quarantined for like 2 weeks or so. And they didn't come out of quarantine until the day they flew to LA to play UCLA. And as you can imagine, it did not go well. So I think he got a pass for that. And even like the next year. And then they just got into this, 6-7, like they're good enough to go to a bowl, but still 6-7. So here we are. Speaking of COVID, Ralph, do you know who the interim coach of Cal is?
I do. I was one of several people who was able to confirm that. I think we all had a suspicion it might be Nick Rolovich.
You say we all. I would imagine most people didn't know he was there.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. Like, because he was an analyst and he wasn't.
They knew about
actually
Brian Harsin probably, that he was the OC, but yeah.
Yeah, Brian Harsin, the former Auburn and Boise State coach, was the OC there. So I think that there was a natural progression. But I think, let me take that back. I think for people who follow it as closely as we do, we knew that Rolovich was on that staff, right? And how odd it was that Nick Rolovich was on the staff at Cal, considering what led to his demise at Washington State. The guy who did a good job at Hawaii and a good job at Washington State. And, from what I've heard from talking to sources is that, yes, like Harsin seemed to be the obvious choice to be the interim coach. It's only one more game. But what I was told is that Harsin sort of said, hey, why don't we put Rolovich in this situation? Because frankly, Nick Rolovich's name is coming around some other job openings. I think Oregon State has been a place where they have either looked into him or he has looked into them. I wouldn't be surprised if there are other places along the West Coast that maybe as the dominoes tip over, he gets involved with a little bit too. So again, what I was told through a source is that after some discussion, Harsin sort of said, hey, why don't we put Nick in this situation? It gets people sort of acclimated to seeing Nick Rolovich as a head coach again. Again, whatever your feelings is on how he got to where he did, it is interesting to see his career revive, Stu. And in the place where it's being revived.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's not just that he's an interim head coach somewhere. Chances are that kind of opportunity was going to come up at some point. But like you heard me say earlier, there was no probably place that took COVID stuff more seriously than Berkeley, the Bay Area in general, but Berkeley specifically. And if for those who don't remember, Nick Rolovich was fired at Washington State because he wouldn't comply with a state mandate at the time, a state vaccine mandate for state employees. That was a long time ago. By the way, not the only fall from grace coach who is back in coaching now. There was also news that Art Briles has made his return, Ralph.
Yeah, Art Briles, the former Baylor coach, fired in 2016. Boy, a long time ago. I had to do some quick Google searching and jogging of the memory this morning as I helped put together a short news headline on that for The Athletic. And I mean, yeah, we're almost 10 years out from his demise. I don't want to make light of it. Certainly a sordid scandal there having to do with the mishandling of sexual assault cases by the university. It really went up the entire chain there. Briles was fired. The president of the university went down. The athletic director went down. And he has been out of the game for a while. There's been a couple of opportunities. Southern Miss, I think, kind of hired him and then pulled back as offensive coordinator. Grambling, he was going to be the offensive coordinator there. He coached overseas for a little while. And now he is landing at Eastern New Mexico University. That is a Division II school. Again, it's been 8 or 9 years. I think Briles has got to be in his mid 60s now. I forgot to look up his age.
He's approaching 70.
Yeah.
No, I mean, he really got the perception, like he became kind of a pariah nationally to the point where, like you said, he couldn't get a decent job. He did twice go and coach in Italy.
Yeah.
Mount Vernon High School at one point hired him.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
A relatively small Texas high school, too, like not one of the monster Texas high schools.
But one of the monster Texas high schools in Stephenville, where he had so much success, named their field after him. Yeah. So it's like he's a pariah in much of the sport, but in the area, he is still very revered in a lot of places. And look, it's been by the time he coaches, it'll have been 10 years since that scandal. So I want to turn back to Cal, though, for a second. I realized that we didn't actually talk about, well, who might be the next coach.
Oh, sure.
It's an ACC job. It is a hard job. Take it from somebody out here. Trying to get people in the Bay Area interested in Cal football at this point when they're so far removed from the good old days, much like Stanford has that challenge as well. You're playing against schools that your fans do not care about. I was at the UNC game. Even Bill Belichick coming out here did not come close to filling that stadium. And I don't really know what they, despite the fact that their pension fund has $200 billion, apparently, the actual operating budget of the athletic department is not doing so well. So I guess the question, Ralph, is who would make sense there that they can actually afford?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know our colleague, Chris Fanini, had a couple of suggestions in his news story yesterday. One of the ones that comes to mind is Tosh Lupoi, who is the defensive coordinator at Oregon. And gosh, Stu, correct me if I'm wrong here. He went to Cal, I'm pretty sure. And hate to fact check on him,
and worked there.
And he worked there.
Got a little infamy. This is a long time ago now, but he was one of the first ones to get in trouble for faking injuries. Yeah. When they were trying to slow down Chip Kelly's offense. Right.
So I think, listen, it's still a Power 4 job. There's only 68 of them. So they could definitely, I could definitely see them attracting candidates. Sean Lewis, I know, is another name. He's at San Diego State right now. I think he's been in on UCLA. I don't know if that's going to work out for him. But if I'm a West Coast or west of the Mississippi, coach with a fair amount of recruiting ties in the area, I could still see a place where, hey, they got to pay at least $5 or $6 million. I think that's the going rate. I don't know if you can do much worse than that. So I know Cal's got some restrictions. I think working for Ron Rivera seems like a good idea in terms of okay, we're going to change the culture of this program and we're going to try to care. God knows there's a lot of football players out there. So yeah, I mean, are they going to have the top of the list candidates? No, I don't think so. But I could certainly understand how they could draw in candidates that, could still be appealing, even within a cluttered market. What will especially be interesting is who they hire and who Stanford hires, because you would think that that would be an overlapping, overlapping candidate pool, Stu.
Well, it's hard to say because, I guess it's hard to say with both. Neither of these guys have come up through college football, Luck or Rivera. I have no idea what Andrew Luck's going to do other than I would expect they'll probably have a coach by early next week, maybe. There's a lot of, I don't know. There could be overlap. There might be that they have completely different people in mind. One name I would bring up first. Well, before I bring that name up, nothing against Tosh Lupoi, but that seems to me, you're supposed to go the opposite of the guy you had before. And if I'm Cal, I'm not hiring another defensive guy because what frustrated their fans so much is Justin Wilcox is a great defensive coach and they had a lot of great defenses and he could never figure out what he wanted to do on offense. They were just constantly cycling through offensive coordinators with all these different styles. If I'm going to try to get somebody from Oregon, I think I'd try to get Will Stein. Only problem is he might be up for better jobs than that. Jim Mora's name has come up, Ralph.
Yeah. And I think Mora also, has eyes on some other things on the West Coast and might be keenly aware that Jed Fish could be a candidate at Florida. I don't know if that's necessarily an easy fit, but clearly Mora's done a really good job at UConn. And I can imagine that if a bigger job opens up, especially one on the West Coast where he's got ties and roots, that would be appealing to him.
could be a big shakeup in the coaching ranks out west. And that you have Cal, Stanford, UCLA, Oregon State, and I don't know if somebody hires Sean Lewis, San Diego State. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some playoff scenarios. And we're back. Obviously, another set of college football rankings will come out Tuesday night. I don't think we want to rehash Notre Dame versus Miami again just yet. Maybe that'll be next episode. No, here's what I wanted to bring up, Ralph, as I'm looking through all the, there's definitely a crowded field of teams that can raise their hands right now and say, hey, I think we should be up for an at-large berth. I think we should be up for an at-large berth. But it's going to take somebody losing to open up spots. Like BYU is sitting there like they're the first team out, and even they feel like either you can win the Big 12 or you're out, right? Utah, I feel like they've reached their peak. But I wanted to bring this up that suddenly dawned on me. You were bringing up all the SEC tiebreaker scenarios the other day. And the fact is, Alabama's probably in the best position right now of anybody to make the SEC title game, beat Auburn. You'll play either Georgia or A&M or maybe Ole Miss. So Alabama's the last team in the field right now at number 10. If that's still the case a week from now and they go to the SEC championship game and lose, okay, and let's say lose by 2 touchdowns, can Alabama, who as of now feels like, of course, they're going to go to the playoff, they have such a great resume, could they be bounced out of the field for losing that 13th game?
Could Alabama play its way out of playoff position?
Yes.
I think the committee last year and committee chairman Ward Manuel, I don't want to say purposely misled the public here, us, but I think they backed themselves into a little bit of a corner this year when they talked about punishing teams for their performance in conference championship games, right? Now, they literally cleaned up one small mess that they made last year, and they came out before the season and said, hey, things aren't set in stone with certain teams heading into conference championship weekend. Remember last year, Stu, like Ward Manuel said something along those lines of like, well,
so strange.
Yeah.
He said he made this declarative statement that anybody whose season was done after Thanksgiving weekend was not going to be reevaluated. He should not have said that.
Which was inadvertent. It's not part of the protocol. And I think he was trying to explain a certain point, but like it got him boxed in and the committee boxed in. I do wonder if this year, especially considering, they tweaked the process a little bit. We talked about emphasis on, strength of record or record strength metric, a new way of calculating strength of schedule where it puts more emphasis on your biggest games as opposed to treating all the games equally. And the other thing too is like, I just don't know if like that's a hard and fast rule, this idea that you can't be punished by losing your conference championship game. I think that's not a terrible overarching principle, but Alabama lost to Florida State and they've have a bunch of really good wins. I don't know if there's another team that has more good wins. So especially in a crowded field, I think that's what you're getting at, Stu. If you have a Texas Tech team that, let's say, loses the Big 12 championship, and now they're in the at-large pool, and you have Miami sitting there in the at-large pool at 10-2, and you have Notre Dame, and you have Oklahoma, and you have Vanderbilt, give me another one or two. Like now, all of a sudden, like I don't know if it's fair to just lock in Alabama. And while I think that they would get through, I'm not sure, like that would be a real headache scenario. All these scenarios sort of are tied to this idea that there just might be an enormous glut of 10-2 teams, Stu.
That's exactly right. And now the only one you mentioned there that Alabama would not have to worry about, I think, is Vanderbilt because they beat them.
Sure.
But isn't this it's not lost on me that this is the exact same scenario in reverse that Alabama got so put out by last year, right? Who's the team that they cannot believe got put in before them? SMU. Mm-hmm. So they would have been fine with SMU dropping out of the conference title game if they lost. But the committee did not do that. Did not drop. I mean, they lost on a last second 50 2-yard field goal. So probably wasn't realistic to think they would. But yeah, they stayed ahead of Alabama.
Can I throw you one? I mean, really, the one that I think becomes, or I wouldn't say it's this specific scenario, because I was trying to do the math on it last week and I ended up screwing up the Big Ten tiebreakers. But I was coming up with a situation where I think I had like 13 teams in the at-large pool, in a 14 teams in the at-large pool. And the one that I think makes things rather tricky is, God forbid, the reaction in Columbus, Ohio, is what happens if Michigan wins this weekend, right? Michigan has a hard time even winning, getting to the Big Ten championship game. Oregon, if it beats Washington, would still be ahead. Don't ask me to explain the tiebreakers. Just trust me on this. Oregon, it would be Oregon, Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. So Michigan gets dropped into the 10-2 at-large pool with a win over Ohio State. Like anything, again, that clutters up, like anytime you say like, okay, who's coming in, that team has to be in. That's why I feel like these arguments get so cluttered, right? And so muddled. Well, if this team wins and is X record with this win, they have to be in. Okay, well, who's out? Does that endanger Oklahoma? Well, Oklahoma beat Michigan. So again, eyes toward the SEC and their possible 5 bids. Maybe that's the scenario when all of a sudden Alabama gets locked out, right? Like if you're looking for how do we Michigan? How do we find another team? Yeah,
because a lot, like I said, some of these teams just really can't change their resume that much at this point. Utah being one that comes to mind. BYU if they're in an at-large situation, but Michigan can certainly change its resume in a big, big way if it beats an 11-0 team. And so then the question becomes, well, you got to put them in, right?
Do you?
Well, I don't know. Michigan to this point, correct me if I'm wrong, does not have a win over a current top 25 team. Maybe what they need is Washington to beat Oregon and get back in there. They lost at USC. They lost at Oklahoma. Like they've mostly piled up wins against over the last 4 weeks, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland. But you can't leave a better last impression than beating number 1 Ohio State. But if you do that and you say, well, they got to be in, well, then who are you taking out is obviously the next question. Same thing, I've been the one saying don't rule out Texas if they beat Texas A&M. Same exact situation, being an 11-0 team. But you just need some teams to lose in there and clear it out.
All right, I got one more for you. And we talk about Michigan maybe making a mess of things by beating Ohio State and inserting itself into the playoff conversation. And what are we going to do with this team that maybe has a win over number 1? Let's throw Georgia Tech beats Georgia, right? And now all of a sudden, Georgia Tech is 10-2. Probably not making the ACC title game, right? Because we've gone over this with Miami 1,000 times. How, it's SMU and it's Virginia and it's Duke even that still can make the ACC championship game. Throw a 10-2 Georgia Tech team with a win over Georgia. Now, again, how much does that sway people? I don't know, but it just creates another level of discussion and another team that has to be considered, right? I don't know if it would be enough for the Yellow Jackets to get in there, but I do know it complicates the situation further for the selection committees too.
I'm glad you brought that one up, Ralph. That one kind of amuses me, and here's why. What have I been hearing about endlessly for the last 2 weeks? You have to rank Miami ahead of Notre Dame because they beat them head to head. And if we're not going to count the games that happened on the field, what are we doing? Well, in this scenario you have, Ralph, Georgia and Georgia Tech would both be 10-2. And Georgia Tech will have beaten Georgia, not in the first game of the season, but the last game of the season.
Right.
But of course, Georgia is in the top 4 right now. Georgia Tech is barely in the top 25. So if you're going to apply the same rationale of why Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame, don't you then have to move Georgia Tech up from the low 20s all the way up above Georgia since they have a head-to-head and the same record?
I don't know, but my point being is that's the things that are going to have to be discussed. It probably wouldn't get to that point, but it's just another potential fire to put out for the selection committee. Hey, why don't you do this and that? Like, these questions might be relatively easy for them to answer, but it creates more tension on the system. How about that? Like, is probably a good way to put it. If you have a couple of odd upsets here and there this weekend, it's funny. Like, we could use an upset or two, I think, to clear out some of the space and make it a little easier on the committee if we want to be benevolent to the committee. But the wrong upsets only make things harder on the committee. So that's what we're going into rivalry weekend. And, depending on how much you like chaos, depends on how many upsets you want to root for.
Just to be clear, I don't think that would actually happen, that Georgia Tech would move all the way up above Georgia. I don't think they would actually make the playoff even.
I don't think so either.
Because what I think we're seeing from the committee is they're willing to put a 2-loss team above a 1-loss team, et cetera, only if the team that's getting jumped is in the ACC or Big 12. I think they're basically saying that an SEC or Big 10 schedule is about 1 loss more difficult than the ACC or Big 12. So because of that, because Georgia Tech, is playing an ACC schedule, they lost to NC State, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think it would be enough to get them in the playoff, obviously, but I do look forward to the gymnastics and rationalizations of why that head-to-head shouldn't count. Should we take a break and come back and do our picks?
We should take a break.
Okay.
All right, we're back, and it's maybe one of the best weeks of the college football season. I know it's the last full week, so it makes us a little sad. But we have games on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and they're rivalry games, and even the cool games, even the games without necessarily CFP stakes, tend to feel cool, right? This weekend, I always love like the territorial cup between Arizona and Arizona State, and Virginia Tech has some playoff implications, but I feel like is always kind of a cool game. It's one of the things that makes the sports one of the few traditions that they can't ruin in the sport is the rivalries and the rivalry. Yeah. Hopefully.
Not yet.
Anyway, we're going to pick some rivalry games and some big games with playoff implications. First of all, I had a great week, and I'm catching up to you, Stu.
Yeah, you're right on my heels.
Yeah, I went 3-1 last week. I missed my upset of Minnesota over Northwestern, though it looked good for a little while, and it did cover. I think they did cover, but that doesn't count here. You have to win the actual upset. So my record is, Stu's record. He's still in first place, 25-18. I am a game behind Stu after he went 2-2 last week. Though Stu also hit his upset pick, North Carolina State, just making Florida State fans more miserable. Bruce is not here to defend himself, but he went 1-3 and sinks further behind all of us at 17 and 26. Let's start with Texas.
I wonder what the magic number is for Bruce to be officially eliminated from contention. He's 7 back. He's 7 back with 8 games to go.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because we only have 2 more weeks.
No, he's 8 back with 8 games to go. Yeah. So the best he can do is if he goes 8-0 and we both go 0-8, but chances are we're not going to be picking quite that differently.
No, I doubt that. Okay, we're going to start with Black Friday. Black Friday night, if I remember correctly, is A&M at Texas. Texas A&M is a 2.5-point favorite over the Longhorns. The renewal of this rivalry was last year in the SEC, and it was in College Station. Texas won. This year, the roles are reversed a little bit, whereas A&M is the sort of playoff, practically in the playoff, has a chance to go to the SEC championship game. And Texas is more of like the, trying to scrape their way into the playoff, right? Like on the outside looking in. So Bruce is picking Texas to score the upset, which would make for another intriguing possible CFP conversation. Who you got here, Stu?
I'm a little surprised Bruce is picking Texas because he's been pretty down on Texas all season, but especially since they got drubbed by Georgia. I'm going Texas. I mean, you're going to give me a 2.5-point spread at home. Yeah, that tells me that the Vegas thinks Texas is definitely capable of pulling it off. Selfishly, Ralph, I'll tell you why I'm picking Texas, though. I'm covering this game. It's a rare chance for me to cover a game because it's on a Friday.
Look at you.
Yeah. To get to an actual college football game. And it would just be better for content if Texas upsets them.
I'm going to go with A&M here. I have a hard time. Listen, I think it's a close game. I would be surprised if this is anything less than this is a double digit spread here. But I think A&M has just been more consistent. Texas lost linebacker Anthony Hill too. So the best part of their team is taking a hit, which is their defense. So I imagine this is going to be a pretty fun game, pretty good game. No matter what happens, A&M will probably end up in the playoff at 11-1, even if they don't make it to the SEC championship game if they lose this. But I'll take the Aggies to win it and to cover.
It's pretty crazy that they've been undefeated all season. And if they lose this one game at the end, they probably miss the SEC championship game. But that's life.
Yeah. All right. So on Saturday, we got a couple of noon games we got to pick here. This one, man, I was in Columbus last year when Ohio State lost to Michigan for the fourth straight year, setting off an existential crisis among Buckeye Nation as they were heading to the playoff, but completely miserable and at wit's end with their coach. And just, he couldn't have been more of a distraught fan base, despite the fact that they would soon go on to win the national championship.
Was that your column from that game about Ohio State being the world's unhappiest playoff team?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, good memory. Great. Yeah, the world's unhappiest playoff team. So Bruce is picking Ohio State to win big. The spread is -10. I've seen it fluctuate a little bit. Stu, what you got in the game?
I'm I've been burned too many times in recent history to say what he just said, that Ohio State's going to win big. I do think Ohio State's going to win. It's hard to see a path for Michigan to win this game, though it would help their cause if both of Ohio State's star receivers are out. But I do think Michigan covers the 10.
It sounds like Tate may have something a little more long-term, Carnell Tate, whereas Jeremiah Smith might have been a little bit more of a load management situation last week. Though definitely something to track, right? With those two guys, if they're both on the field, Ohio State's awfully tough to stop. So you know what? I've been wrong 4 years running. I don't think I have taken Michigan in any of the games, even
even the 2023 one, huh?
Yeah, I think I've taken Ohio State literally every single time. So why be right now, right? Like, why change up now? I don't think these types of streaks, Stu, end in close games. I think they end in emphatic victory, right? In fact, I think the thing that Ohio State has to guard against, because I think this is what happened last year, is, we don't turn a red zone trip into a touchdown early. We throw a pick. We miss a field goal. And all of a sudden, it's the second half. And instead of it being 17-3, it's 7-3 or 10-7 or something like that. I think that's when things get problematic for Ohio State. So I'm going to pick the Buckeyes to win going away, because I think that's the formula for this streak to end, is for them to not be involved in a close game. And I am very well prepared to be wrong again.
I do think that the problem last year, or was that the pressure got to him. They played so tight. They played not to lose. And I don't know, it feels like maybe this whole season has been a long con with the playing the slowest pace in the world. And, we have this great quarterback and these great receivers, but sometimes we're not ever even going to throw down field in the game. And they just come out guns blazing in this game and try to score as many points as possible. We'll see.
Yeah, again, it would be very interesting discussion considering what has happened over the last year with a national championship for Ryan Day and the narrative shifting. Like, what does that conversation look like in Columbus, or sound like in Columbus, if he loses this one? And there's still one of the top 4 seeds, maybe even going into the playoff, you know?
It just doesn't feel like it would be a crisis like last year.
I don't know. We might be underrating.
They haven't lost since last year's Michigan game. But look, it would be bad, but it wouldn't be like we got to fire this guy tomorrow bad. I feel like if you win the national championship, you get a 1-year reprieve.
Maybe. I don't know. Again, we're not Buckeyes. Maybe we're underestimating this a little bit. Okay, next game is a game that I'm going to be at on Saturday, and that is Miami at Pitt. Playoff ramifications certainly for Miami. Same thing for Pitt. Pitt could still win the ACC and squeeze its way in there. Miami's favored by 6.5, which honestly a little smaller spread than I thought. I mean, Pitt's played well, but we saw what they look like against elite competition against Notre Dame. Though maybe that game didn't matter, as Pat Narduzzi said. So, what do you? Bruce has Pitt to cover, to play this game close and cover. What about you, Stu? Where do you think Miami and Pitt lands?
Mm-hmm. Not going to surprise anybody based on some of the things I've been saying over the last couple of weeks. I'm going Pitt to win the game outright. Somebody's got to end this interminable debate. And so why not the Panthers? They have juice on offense, right? Look what they did to Georgia Tech. They did get completely shut down by Notre Dame because Notre Dame's really good. So Pitt for me. What about you?
Well, if you recall, there was I can't remember this, 2017, was it, Stu, when Miami went in there as the number 2 team in the country and a freshman quarterback at Pitt, that was Kenny Pickett, ended up pulling the upset that knocked Miami. Yeah,
I remember that they beat Miami was undefeated. I remember the Pitt won. I didn't remember that Kenny Pickett was the quarterback.
It was Kenny Pickett. He hadn't played much that year, not even as much as Mason Heinschel has played this year. So there is some, precedent for whatever that's worth for Miami rolling into a cold, I don't even know, Heinz Stadium, Acrisure Stadium, whatever the heck that stadium is called these days, a cold and windy day at Pitt and having their playoff hopes dashed. There is precedent for that. I don't think that's going to happen. As well as Pitt played last week, they got some offensive line issues, and that is not the team to have offensive line issues again.
That is true.
So I will not only take Miami, I will take Miami to cover despite the whole Mario Cristobal of it all and this fear that like Miami will just sort of figure out a way to screw it up. And as you said, clear up a debate for the selection committee.
Yeah, I guess I'm still doubting Mario. Maybe I shouldn't at this point. I mean, the 2 quote unquote bad losses, now the SMU one, I don't think is a bad loss, right? They lost in overtime on the road against a team that is playing for a spot in the ACC championship game this week. Yeah.
Yeah. Also a team, by the way, in SMU that lost to 2 mediocre Big 12 teams. That's still a thing. Anyway,
it's all relative. That doesn't mean you can't be the best team in the ACC.
That is very true. And teams do get better. They get healthier. They do not stay the same. All right. Last game is another big playoff ramification game. So interesting fact here, Stu. Ohio State and Michigan will meet as ranked teams. Ohio State's number 1, Michigan's number 15 in the AP poll. We're using that because that goes farther back. For the 50th time, no 2 rivals have met as ranked teams more than Ohio State and Michigan. Tennessee and Vanderbilt have played 118 games, maybe 119, depending on what school you believe, about a forfeited game back in like 1910. But they've played at least 118 games. This will be the first time Vanderbilt and Tennessee have ever both been ranked when they play. Tennessee is a 2.5-point favorite. Vandy is the team trying to stay in the playoff race, though. Bruce says, give me Vandy and Diego Pavia. Who do you like?
Yeah, I like Vandy too. I don't really have a great X's and O's reason why. Doesn't matter. I like the story. But it is Diego Pavia. If it's a little, I don't know that people really care when we talk about the Heisman, but he's number 1 on my poll right now. He is on an absolute tear. And he is the reason that Vanderbilt is playing in a ranked versus ranked Tennessee game for the first time in history, why they could possibly vault into the playoff. So I just can't pick against the guy right now.
Yeah, I want to root for the story. And you're right. The Pavia thing, he's been sort of like right on the edge of my top 3. And frankly, like, I don't know, like I feel like I haven't done a really good, like, let me think about the Heisman for like a half an hour and really think about it. I feel like every week the straw poll comes in and I'm like, Mendoza love, David Bailey. Okay, yeah, that's what I had last week. And I think there's no reason to change that this week. But Pavia definitely has been incredible. You know, these massive games he's put up to drag them or have them remain in the playoff race. I'm going to be the guy who throws cold water on the whole thing, on the great story, and say Tennessee beats Vanderbilt. I think they're two pretty much even teams. The spread suggests that. So, you know, again, like, consider me the Debbie Downer here, and I'll pick Tennessee to upset the to upset the Doors and clear them out of the playoff picture.
Well, they wouldn't be upsetting them. They're 2.5-point favorites. The Vols are.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying.
Basically, I know what you mean, though. To like kind of Vanderbilt's ranked much higher than them, right? So yeah. I get what you mean.
Yeah, it would be Tennessee spoiling what's been a great story in college football and in the SEC. All right, we got to do some upsets. I'll give Bruce's here. And the thing was, we required, the team here made a decision. You had to pick an upset from a rivalry game. It had, not the games that we picked. It had to be an upset from one of the rivalry games this weekend. So it could have been any one of the great matchups out there, preferably one of the ones that maybe had a little tie to the CFP. So Bruce did the thing, decided to go to the Iron Bowl and pick Auburn to upset Alabama. Oh boy. I would not want to be Kalen DeBoer if that was the situation. And there's a whole bunch of interesting, speculative coaching dominoes that could be tipped over if Kalen DeBoer suddenly becomes available on the day after the Iron Bowl.
Wait. Are you suggesting Greg Byrne is going to fire him if he loses to Auburn?
No. I would not suggest that. I do not suggest that. I think there's been a lot of chatter about, if DeBoer loses this game, does he then all of a sudden become an appealing candidate where somebody like at Penn State might say, hey, Kalen, why don't you come up here? We love you. We still love you, even though the folks down there might not be as thrilled with you. So Bruce has Auburn over Alabama to upset the apple cart down there. Who do you have, Stu?
By the way, that's not an unreasonable pick he's making. Alabama's only a 5.5-point favorite. And we know that weird things happen at Jordan-Hare. So, including some pretty crazy Auburn-Alabama games. Sticking on the theme of we need something to shake up the playoff race. It's too stale right now. Oregon, coming off its big win over USC, goes to Washington, goes to Seattle in their big rivalry game. And the Huskies kicked some butt over UCLA this week. The Huskies do it. They are, I believe, 6.5-point dogs. The Huskies knock off Oregon and send us into a debate next week over whether Oregon, with the second loss, should still be in the CFP.
Oof. Yeah, that would definitely muddle some things up for the committee. Okay, I'm gonna do the thing. We'll go to Black Friday. Everybody's wondering what Lane Kiffin will do next. I've covered a bunch of Egg Bowls in my life when I was stationed in Mississippi for the Associated Press earlier in my career. I've covered a bunch of Egg Bowls. They were Thanksgiving Day Egg Bowls. This one's on Black Friday. Mississippi State's only a 7.5-point underdog here. I don't necessarily love the matchup, right? I think that Ole Miss has a chance to really run the ball well on Mississippi State. So it's not necessarily a great like X's and O's matchup here. But I'm going to go chaos theory, and we're going to see what happens if Mississippi State beats Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. Does it influence Lane's decision? What happens with the Rebels in the playoff race if they have lost to one of the worst teams in the SEC? So this is a chaos pick. I'm picking the Bulldogs and Klanga to make the big upset to start your Black Friday. I think this game kicks off at 11 a.m. Central Time.
Don't you think if Ole Miss loses, that ups the chances that he leaves? Because now it's like, well, they aren't a lock to make the playoff. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, we said on here the other day, like they're all going to offer him a lot of money. It's not like LSU is going to throw so much money at him that he can't possibly stay at Ole Miss. His reasoning, if he decides to go to LSU or Florida, is I don't think I can win the national championship at Ole Miss. I can knock on the door, but I don't think I can get the kind of roster you need that you can get in LSU or Florida. So if they lose the Egg Bowl and either don't make the playoff or clearly aren't the kind of team that is going to win the national championship, it's like kind of makes this decision for him, doesn't it?
It certainly makes it easier in terms of you don't have to feel like you're leaving behind a team, right? Like it probably alleviates some pressure on your conscience, right? That I'm leaving behind this team that can win a national championship. Because I do think at 10-2 with Ole Miss's resume, they might become very much the bubble team that gets squeezed out if some of these other scenarios pop up. So there's our picks. It's going to be a great weekend of football, and yeah, I think we're all sort of like we all push the chaos buttons there in one way, shape, or form, Stu.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. There are a couple picks there I didn't really feel all that strongly about, but I'm just leaning into like, give me some chaos, give me something that will make the last week, leading into Championship Saturday, a little more juicy.
All right, Stu. So it's a holiday weekend. We all have plans and we have to go have some merriment with our families, squeeze in a little Thanksgiving celebration. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone who listens and watches this show. Our normal schedule tweaked a little bit this week. Instead of an episode popping up Thursday in your feed, it will be out no later than Wednesday. As we try to give you as much content as possible while also being able to not get in trouble with our wives.
And that show will obviously have a reaction to the playoff rankings that come out Tuesday night. It is also our mailbag episode, so please send your questions to theaudiblepod@gmail.com, and we will see you then.